Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, May 6th, 2019, and I'm Cara Santa Maria. This week, we're going to have a chat with Dr. Barry Sandrew. But before we do, I want to thank those of you who made Talk Nerdy possible. Remember, Talk Nerdy is and will always be 100% free to download. And that's because I rely on support both from ad sales and from listeners just like yourself. So if you want to hear your name called out at the top of the show, just visit patreon.com/talknerdy. And you will see how you can support the show. This week, I want to thank Pedro M. Rosario Barbosa, Phil T-Bear, the Zombie Drummer, David J.E. Smith, Jeffrey Perez, Gabriel Felipe Jaramillo Gonzalez, Brian Holden, and Jeffrey Sewell. All right. So this week, I chat with a very interesting individual. His name's Dr. Barry Sandrew. He's actually Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital neuroscientist turned entrepreneur, inventor, digital imaging expert, visual effects pioneer, and filmmaker. And we're going to talk all about the really cool work that he did inventing film colorization technique and doing all sorts of really cool visual effects over the course of his career. Super fascinating stuff. A little bit of science meets Hollywood in this episode. So without any further ado, here he is, Dr. Barry Sandrew. Well, Barry, thank you so much for joining me today.
This is a great opportunity. Thank you for inviting me.
I have to first and foremost thank you for being so flexible. I have had a bananas schedule recently between trying to work on my PhD, working on the new TV show that I'm working on, which I can't even tell anybody about yet, and seeing clients and podcasting and oh my goodness, it's been a ton of fun. But
let me turn something around a little bit. You're working on a PhD in what?
Clinical psychology.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. That's where the seeing patients comes in. And it's been a ton of fun, but it's also like, there's just a lot right now. It's been pretty exhausting. But of course, about having kind of your toe in a lot of different pools. So from what I gather, and correct me as we go through, so you did your PhD from Harvard in neuroscience, right?
No, I didn't do it at Harvard. I did it at State University of New York at Stony Brook. I got my doctorate there, and then I did a National Institute of Health postdoctoral fellowship at Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons, and then I became staff neuroscientist at Harvard for 7 years.
I see. Okay, cool. So you're a staff neuroscientist at Harvard.
That's right.
And you did this training before. And so what was your position when you're at Harvard? What does a staff neuroscientist do?
I was involved with basic neuroscience research, studying the neurochemistry, neurophysiology of the brain. In particular, I was studying emotions, memory, and pain.
So the interesting thing is that now you are working, you have a lot of things you're working on. You're working on a couple of startups, one in sports betting, one in augmented reality. You're also doing, you're heavily involved in these really cool visual effects projects for Hollywood film. So before we even dive into all of those cool things, I have to know, how does one transition from neuroscience to visual effects?
Well, when I was at Harvard, I was also in one of my labs, the laboratories that I opened up there, or founded rather, was one in neuroradiology.
Okay.
And this was in the early days of neuroradiology, even at Harvard. And it hadn't really gone digital yet. It was still analog. People were still looking at X-rays and that sort of thing. There were no digital X-rays or anything. And at Harvard, we used to get all of the greatest toys from Siemens and from GE and all the rest. And they gave us PET scans and CTs and MRIs that today are commonplace. But back then, they were really leading edge, and a lot of them were very experimental. So I got involved in all of that, and I got fixated on trying to improve the diagnostic quality of those images using color, using 3D reconstruction, all of those things that today are very common, but back then nobody ever even thought about it. So I was using color in particular to improve the diagnostic value of those X-rays and the digital work, the PET scans and the CT and everything. And out of the blue, some entrepreneurs from the East Coast approached me to find out if there's a way to colorize black and white movies. They had 3 failed attempts to produce a graphic engine to do that, and they finally got some advisors from Stanford Research who said you should look at medical imaging because that's where it's all happening. They had heard about some of the work that I had been doing, that I was trying to create a computer. I was trying to build a computer to do 3D reconstructions for neurologists, and they asked me if I could figure out a way to do that, because there was an analog version of colorization, and everybody hated it because it was terrible. It was basically a filter over Shirley Temple's face, and it all bled around her, and it looked horrible. And that's really what gave colorization a bad name, even though Frank Capra actually hired them to do It's a Wonderful Life. And people don't really realize that. They think that Frank Capra was against colorization, but no, he actually wanted it to be done. James Garner showed him the version of their analog version, said, hey, you got to do this with It's a Wonderful Life. And he was going to do it.
So was that what we think of when we think of Technicolor?
No,
okay.
no.
So that's not like the green teeth.
Oh no, that's the green. It's the green teeth. It's the yellow teeth. All of that. Okay. That's what the analog stuff looked like.
Gotcha. Okay, exactly. Yeah, I remember that for sure.
And what these guys wanted to do is create a digital version that would be tight, that would be actually a visual effect that would look real. And doing that with X-rays, I had those tools to do it. And when they asked me how I might do it, I basically, went back to my lab, and I didn't know colorization was being done. Topper and a few other movies were being done in analog. And then I looked into it, and I realized that it was very controversial, but I had a way to do it, and it was an intellectual problem for me. So I gave them a white paper how I would do it. And then I went on my merry way. I said, good luck. And I went on my merry way and didn't hear from them until I went to the Radiological Society of North America conference in Chicago. And they said, your white paper is amazing. We think it would work. And we'd like you to check on our latest graphic version of how to colorize, digitally colorize movies. And they made me go from Chicago down to Austin to take a look at what they were doing. And I walked into this studio with these very high-powered graphic computers, and I saw a huge screen, and on it was one image of the day the Earth stood still, when the silver robot or alien was coming out of this flying saucer. It's pretty iconic. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, let me see how your process works. And they said, well, it's working. And it was like watching paint dry. And I said, this is not going to work. In a movie, you got 180,000 frames, black and white frames, and they all have to be in color. If it's going to be this slow, you're never going to be able to do it. I told them to just, close up that shop and forget about it, because they're not going to be able to succeed. Then they finally asked me if I could invent it myself using the white paper, basically the process that I gave them. And I said, well, I've got a career in neuroscience at Harvard, and they made me an offer, frankly, that I couldn't refuse. And I left my family back in Boston, took a leave of absence from Harvard, and went to San Diego to basically build this process all by myself, me and one computer.
Wow. So
I developed the process. And oh, by the way, I should tell you that this group of people, we're not just anybody coming out of the East Coast. The board of directors included Al Kasha, who won two Oscars for best music. Peter Engel, who's one of the most prolific NBC producers ever. At the time, he was doing Saved by the Bell, which nobody had heard of before, and he asked this company that I was joining to actually fund his pilot, which we did. And the president was Bernie Weitzman, who became a very dear friend, who headed up Desilu Studios. So these weren't people, just anybody. They were substantial people in the industry. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have left my career to go to San Diego to try to do this thing. But what happened was we ended up. I ended up getting a prototype that was good enough for a press conference, and we did it across from Universal in the Milk Building, which isn't there any longer. Murray Weitzman, who was the publicist for Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, all of these people, he just loved what I was doing, and he introduced me to Sid Luft, who was Judy's husband and manager, and Sid had a whole bunch of Judy's old films, old concerts, and everything. Gave me a lot of his that material to colorize, and that's what we showed at this press conference. I showed, Frank Sinatra with his blue eyes coming out and singing a duet with Judy Garland.
Smart.
And it looked beautiful.
Yeah.
And the press basically looked at it and said, "Hey, this could work."
Yeah.
And that's how it happened.
Oh, that's so cool. And so what year was that when you kind of finished putting in all of that effort and got it where it needed to be?
That company, I left Harvard in December '86. I had the press conference in May of '87, and then June of '87, Republic Pictures gave me Bells of St. Mary's to do, very first movie with Bing Crosby, and that's when it all started. And then we went public the next year.
Very cool. And so at that point, it sounds to me like you made the decision. You were like, "This is where it's at. This is really interesting. I love doing this. This is my new career."
Well, the money was good.
Yeah. And so, and I think it's a really interesting story because a lot of people listen to the show, and a lot of times when I am asked to go and give talks at, sometimes at universities, but sometimes at just academic conferences, we talk a lot about academic careers, and we talk a lot about what is still to this day called a quote unquote alternative career, which is getting your training in academia and then working in some sort of industry. And more, exactly. I'm really pushing for this conversation about the fact that that is not an alternative career. It's a career. Like you can get a really incredible academic training and not stay in academia if that's what you want.
Exactly. I mean, you hear a lot about neuroscientists in particular for some reason becoming entrepreneurs, and there's so many of them. It's amazing. Once you've got that doctorate, everybody knows. Yeah, you don't know everything, but a lot of people think you know everything. You know what I mean? It's sort of a ticket. And if you really know what you're doing, and you can. And you can use your training in diverse areas where that you can actually monetize. That's gold.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and that's really what college education is. The bachelor's degree now, I think in many ways is kind of a new high school diploma. It's a ticket. It doesn't mean you have to do the job that you studied for your major in school. It just means that you've passed this certain level of competency to prove to your employer that, okay, I'm qualified to be able to do this job because I have the bachelor's. And then, the master's is a different level of that same conversation. And in many ways, that's what the PhD is as well. It doesn't mean that you don't have a lot of expertise. No. Obviously you do. That's the whole point. There's a lot of depth and maybe sometimes a little less breadth when you get to that level. But it really is. I love that you called it a ticket because I think that's a good way to visualize it for people who are slogging through and suffering through their PhDs right now. And maybe sometimes this happens where they have this eureka moment where they're like, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Well, the one thread that has gone through virtually everything I've done from from medical imaging as a neuroscientist uh, through Hollywood, 2D to 3D conversion, colorization, and augmented reality. The one thread is digital imaging,
Yeah.
and the whole thing has to do with visual imaging, and that's I was at the right place at the right time, both at in medicine because that was the pioneering days of digital medical imaging,
Hmm.
and in Hollywood because I was there actually before Hollywood went digital,
Yeah.
just before Hollywood went digital. In fact, I created the first DI, digital intermediary, which is the basics behind doing visual effects today. You can't do a visual effect without creating a digital intermediary or a digital copy of an entire feature film.
Hmm.
And Bells of St. Mary's, that very first digital movie, I mean, I didn't know you couldn't do it. And that's what everybody told me it was impossible after I did
Well,
it.
good. I'm
But
glad. I'm glad they waited until then.
but so that was the very first movie that was ever completely 100% digitized as a DI, and I beat Technicolor by 3 years.
Wow. Okay, so I would love to take a second to talk about, maybe the difference between like what is digitization, what was really technically the difference between what you did and then ultimately what Technicolor did, and I think what everybody ended up doing, and what was being done prior to that.
That's another couple hours, actually.
Is there a top line that maybe you could share?
Well, and no, I mean, when I was at, I mean, typically everything was film back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when you wanted to do an edit, I mean, not a cross dissolve, you had to do it optically
Mm.
with, this huge piece of equipment with two projectors, and basically you're shooting a third projector, creating this kind of cross dissolve. It was very, very complex.
Wow.
Um, but I got involved in it a little bit, trying to use some of that analog stuff to create digital. But for the most part, it was very crude. Nevertheless, there were a lot of holdouts. In other words, there were a lot of what I call legacy engineers
Hmm.
within Hollywood who would not give up film. They said, you know, you have to have film grain in the movie,
Hmm.
because it's more organic. You have to have, and when the film goes through the projector in the sprockets, it weaves a little bit. I mean, it's called film weave. And they said you have to have film weave in there because the story has to breathe.
How
So they
funny.
really honestly believe this kind of stuff. And they
Yeah.
said it'll never ever go digital because they felt digital was limiting.
Mm.
Analog, I mean, if you have an X-ray, you have an infinite amount of information in it. But once you've digitized it, well, now you've got pixels. So you've actually eliminated a certain amount of information. It's easier
Hmm.
to read, it's easier to use, and everything like that. But you have, in fact, sampled the information.
Hmm.
And they felt that would never happen in movies. Well, it did.
Oh, yeah, it
It
did.
did.
Across the board, it did.
Yeah.
And so, okay, what about when we talk about specifically about colorization? Because that process, we were talking a little bit offline before we started recording, and I mentioned Peter Jackson's relatively new movie, They Shall Not Grow Old, where I thought this was a colorization process of World War I footage. But this is something that's maybe a little bit different from colorization. So maybe I got my technical terms mixed up there.
Well, it is colorization in a way.
Hmm.
It's not colorization as I define it.
Okay.
Colorization as I define it. If I take a movie like It's a Wonderful Life and Holiday Inn, which I did in 87, 88,
Hmm.
and I did Miracle on 34th Street in 86, and in no, in 26, 27, 28, I did those three movies. And those are probably the best example of colorization ever. I mean, they really hit the high mark.
Hmm.
And really, when I take a movie like It's a Wonderful Life, it's already restored, it's already stabilized, the film looks pristine, it's beautiful. And it has a certain depth of luminance, a certain depth of gray that represents the image. And when I put in color into that image, it fills that grayscale.
Okay.
In other words, it doesn't go beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've got 8 bits of gray, you got 256 levels of gray, we'll say this is very simple. And all of a sudden I put in some extra levels of color
Mm-hmm.
beyond the 256 in terms of saturation. It'll look artificial.
Okay.
So you can't go beyond what the frame tells you it can hold.
Gotcha. Because then it's like you're painting on top of it.
You're exactly
Okay.
right. So the end result is that the movie looks as if it were actually filmed in color back then with effects. I mean, like in like It's a Wonderful Life, when they were walking in the garden in the moonlight. Well, we cast blue shadows on things, even on the flowers that were there. So they gave it a blue tinge from the moonlight and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it just as if you would do it with a gel in actually shooting a movie.
Sure.
So we're able to do all of that creative stuff. So that's the way. That's the invention that I brought in, but what Stereo D did at Deluxe, and these guys are really great. They've been my competitors in 2D to 3D conversion, but we're friendly competitors, and I think they're wonderful people.
Nice. Yeah.
And Aaron Perry, I talked to him about doing Peter Jackson, and I said, damn, Aaron, you should have come to me. And he says, no. He said, Barry, hold back judgment until you actually see it.
Yeah.
And I saw it. And what I realized was it really wasn't colorization, because remember, I don't add any luminance. I don't add any grayscale. I don't add anything to the actual image other than color. They added a lot to that image besides just color, contouring, texture, all of these other things. So, in addition to color, plus then they slowed it down.
Yeah, they changed the frame rate for a lot of them. Yeah.
So it would look current, and then they dubbed over it.
They did a lot of work to manipulate that footage.
Right. So it was really a visual effect.
For sure.
I mean, colorization is a visual effect, but this was high-end visual effect. And here's the difference. The difference is that they could never do that for It's a Wonderful Life. The reason they couldn't do it for It's a Wonderful Life is because, first of all, it would change the movie considerably. But number two, it would be prohibitively expensive.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, They Shall Not Grow Old. I guess that's the fundamental difference. They were tasked with taking archival war footage and making something that brought it into a current relevance.
100%. Looked like it was shot today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that as we watch it, we connect with these soldiers and we feel like they're people instead of like reel-to-reel newspaper images of people, which makes them feel very distant from us.
Right. And it was beautiful and it was great. It was groundbreaking what they did. And, he made it very difficult from what I understand. Because he first of all, this stuff has no grayscale to begin with because it's so old.
Yeah. Sometimes they had to just figure out how to work the footage just to get it to be light enough to see it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they cropped in, which made it even less resolution. So the resolution that you're seeing in this that's so good is all artificial. And they did a beautiful job of it. You'll never see I Love Lucy looking like that.
Yeah. And it's cool to see that there are so many different ways in, and that the field in many ways, I mean, has exploded. And we're not just talking colorization, we're talking, visual effects in general. Visual effects are, I don't think that they're, unless a movie touts now, right, that this is like a classic film technique, or that this is a traditionally shot film, or that most movies that we see, especially, let's be honest, like big budget movies or action movies, are, I think it's getting to the point where it's more 3D or more visual effects than classic live action filming.
Well, you take Life of Pi, and I did a
Mm-hmm.
little work on it, but you take Life of Pi, and it, in 95% of it was animated. It's an animated movie.
Mm-hmm.
The boat was real, the kid was real, everything else was
Yeah.
pretty much not real. It was all shot in a big pool.
Yeah.
But one of the problems with that is that visual effects is so important in the industry and vital in the industry because none of the superhero movies could ever be made
No.
without all the visual effects and everything like that. But you take Rhythm and Hughes that did Life of Pi,
Mm-hmm.
and Life of Pi it was wonderful. It was a major blockbuster, but they went bankrupt right afterwards.
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate. It is very expensive still, isn't it?
It's very expensive to do it, but there's so much competition.
Yeah.
Really, everybody's working against each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to try and make the most maybe fantastic, but also at the same time realistic story that really does take you. I mean, it really does speak to, I think, a different type of filmmaking. And maybe I'm wrong here, but when I watch movies, there are two different ways that I personally watch movies. One of them is to dig deeper into reality, and the other is to have like full escapism. And I think that these fantastic visual effects can really help you escape. And what's interesting is when I think there's been a new shift recently with visual effects to try and take you deeper into reality, which is maybe aging somebody down so that they can play young in the same film, or capturing somebody after they've passed away to be able, or taking the captures that they took before they died and then manipulating them in such a way that even after they've passed away, they can maybe complete the film. And it's really interesting to see what kinds of problems digital effects have been able to work on solving.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Today, they're almost to the point where digital humans are convincing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Almost.
Almost.
They're not there yet.
Yeah, but there
Yeah.
are certain smart ways that I think the really brilliant directors are using digital humans so that they don't have to be lead characters, so that you're kind of seeing them walk down a hallway, or maybe the face is never 100% in view, and they really are convincing. It's getting so close, and it's just we're not stuck in full uncanny valley anymore, which is really neat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only going into film, but it's also going into stage work now with stage holograms,
Okay, so
like with Michael Jackson and like Tupac.
yeah. So obviously, we've kind of seen some examples, like at Coachella and things like this, where we're seeing more like Pepper's ghost phenomena. But you had mentioned holography previously, and I was really interested in maybe some of your insights about utilizing holography, like in a modern way.
Well, I think first we have to set the stage by saying that none of this is holography. In reality, it's not.
In the
These
scientific
are not.
sense. Yeah.
These are not holograms.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're very good effects, and I would place them more in the realm of augmented reality.
Okay.
Because Pepper's Ghost is an augmented reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's 360 or greater years old, and they used to use it as a parlor trick for seances and that sort of thing. And it's just a reflection it's a reflection off a mirror. But Disney used it in their parks, the theme parks, and it was used for Michael Jackson at the Golden Globes, and a lot of people are doing it. Ahmed Zappa is doing a tour using the technology to present his father, Frank Zappa. It's a fantastic tour. It's a lot of fun.
That's really cool.
So it really works, but it's ancient technology. But there's other technology that advances that same venue in a better way. I don't know if you've ever seen the Pepsi Max bus stop commercial on YouTube.
I don't think so.
Well, people should look at it
Okay.
because it's very cool. And what they did was they took a bus stop in the UK, and it has a window on either side, so you can see the street on either side, but it keeps you out of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and they what these people did was they took one of those windows out, and they put an LED screen there, and then they put cameras on the street facing side, so that window actually turned into, once it was that the LED screen actually turned into a window into the other side. It looked like it was an iPad basically with cameras,
Neat.
back facing cameras. And then what they did was they overlaid augmented reality. They had a tentacle coming out of a manhole and grabbing a guy and bringing him into the manhole. And people are looking at this like it's real, because it looks no different than the window on the other side, because it's all facing the street and the street's all lined up. So if you take something like that and you create a 40-foot screen, say using Sony's micro LEDs that you can actually tile. So you just picture a 40-foot LED screen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with cameras facing towards the stage, you could have an empty stage, but you could overlay Elvis or anybody else walking around throughout that stage, and with choreographed color, lighting and everything, and he could be interacting with live humans in the back.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So this is an advance, a huge advance from where we are today with Pepper's Ghost.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. I mean, and think about it doesn't take much, right? I mean, this is kind of going back to your neuroscience training. It doesn't have to be perfect in order to trick the mind into thinking it's real, so long as it fits in kind of these traditional schemas. Like it's like optical illusions. Like your brain will fill in gaps. So long as it doesn't take you to a place that's out of comfort, so long as it feels close enough and approximates in a close enough way, your brain will start to perceive it as if like you're literally watching a dead person risen.
Well, you've just hit on my latest interest, and that is to make augmented reality into an entertainment medium. And I'm doing it in a way, and it's in stealth mode right now, but it'll be out within the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically what you're saying right there. It's allowing people to become voyeurs in an entertainment venue.
Mm-hmm.
But an entertainment venue that's not supposed to be an entertainment venue, if you know what I mean.
Interesting.
So yeah, so that's we're working on it now. We're doing our proof of concept, and we should have this done within the next 6 months, involving some very, very sophisticated point cloud technology.
So I know that it's not out yet, right? So you probably have to be careful about how you talk about it, but can you tell us any more about kind of the technology, or like what the goals are?
No, but we could follow up on it.
Okay,
we could follow up on it in 6 months.
All right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank the sponsor of this week's episode. It's EveryKey, and EveryKey is going to help you with so many problems, whether it's forgetting your passwords and logins all the time on your machine, whether it's a fear of being hacked, which is a legitimate concern nowadays, whether you're really stressed about time, or maybe you're just feeling a bit frustrated in life. The great thing about EveryKey is it's going to help you take back your time and your life. Let me tell you how it works. So EveryKey is this really cool little device that you plug into your computer, and it remembers the passwords to your website accounts, or it automatically generates super secure passwords for you. It can also unlock your devices, like your laptops, your tablets, and your phones when you're nearby, and lock them down again when you walk away. And soon, get this, it's going to help you unlock your car and your house as well. But here's the great part, in case you're concerned: if you lose your EveryKey, you can freeze it to make sure that no one else can use it. No more trying to remember passwords. No more worrying about getting hacked. It's a Bluetooth key. It's like really, really smart, and it makes life so much more convenient. So guys, I don't know what you're waiting for. I think it's time to try EveryKey. All you got to do is go to everykey.com and use the promo code nerdy20 and you will get 20% off of your entire purchase. Again, that's EveryKey.com and use the promo code nerdy20 to purchase your new EveryKey and get 20% off. All right, guys, let's get back to the show. Then maybe we can take a moment to talk about augmented reality, because I think that, there's some people listening who are like, yeah, AR, sure. And there are other people who are like, I've heard that word before, but I feel like I don't quite know what it is.
Well, there's virtual reality, there's augmented reality, and there's mixed reality.
Okay.
And virtual reality is pretty much computer generated. You can have video in it too, 360-degree video. This is where you actually wear an apparatus over your eyes, and you have headphones, and you're taken totally outside of your own reality, and you're presented with visuals and sounds and everything that make you feel like you're in another place. This has been around for decades, and it's gotten to the point where it's really improved tremendously. But it's a very unique form of it's a unique media. It's great for games. It's great for documentaries, perhaps for tourism things, whatever.
Yeah.
But for storytelling, it's very, very difficult.
Right, because you can't follow the plot unless you focus on it. Like, because it's up to you where you're looking when you're doing VR.
That's right. So, Ang Lee once said, when he was asked, what do you think of VR? He said, my VR is better than your VR. Let me move the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But
and that's the way I feel about it. But augmented reality actually overlays within your own reality. So it overlays images that can be can fit. They can appear to actually really be there within your own reality, and that opens up a whole new realm of possibilities in terms of storytelling. And that's where I can't get into it too deeply.
But it's interesting because obviously you are really involved in and enamored with Hollywood films. And so the angle that your work is taking, and I think that a lot of people who are interested in AR is taking, is in storytelling. But when I think of AR, I almost always think of marketing, which makes me so sad because it's such an obvious low-hanging fruit that once AR, or as AR is getting to be more and more realistic. And maybe a good example that we can say of augmented reality that we've seen, maybe a more simplistic example is like that Pokemon game that people were playing, or even sometimes you'll see companies that are selling, like, let's say a pair of glasses, and then you can like virtually try them on, something like that, where it's overlaying it over your face. And I'm always going to this place where I'm like seeing the future 20, 30 years from now, where everything is AR and you're walking down the street and there are these fake billboards and you're trying on clothes digitally, and it like freaks me out to no end.
Oh, it's going to become ubiquitous. There's no doubt about it. And the beauty of it is that there's no barrier to entry, because 95% of us have smartphones that can see, that can display augmented reality. But, in retail, it's going to be huge. But there are some other really cool things that are being done. Jackson Pollock has a wing at the New York Museum of Modern Art. And one very, very innovative artist actually had an app made, and he actually had a private art exhibit at the Jackson wing, using his own material. Because what he did was he actually, in this app that he downloaded to his friends and who he invited it to the art exhibit. You pointed at any one of Jackson's paintings, and that is a target for the other person's painting.
Oh, wow. So it just completely perfectly overlaid them.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah. So this amateur painter actually had his own art exhibit at the Jackson Pollock exhibit.
I love that. And you even see sometimes with like educational toys and things like that, these these AR cards that are so genius. They have some sort of marker on them. And when you use the right app and your phone targets on this little paper card, all of a sudden what was 2D pops up as a gorgeous 3D image of a dinosaur or the space station or whatever it is you're learning about. I mean, I could definitely see museums becoming fully AR immersive within the next few years. Oh, they're already doing it. Yeah.
And there's a company called Octagon Studios, and they've got these alphabet cards, and they're very simple alphabet cards, but each one of them has an animal on it. And you take your mobile phone and you look at that animal, and the animal comes to life. And you've got a monkey, and it's animated, and it looks beautiful, looks photoreal. And you put a banana card right next to it, and he goes over and eats the banana.
Cute.
My daughter is, she's a licensed therapist. She deals with autistic kids, and she uses these all the time. It really, really helps with them and getting their attention and everything, because it appears to be magic. And virtual reality, when you put those goggles on, you expect to be wowed.
Yeah.
But when you actually see something in your own reality that shouldn't be there, that's magic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. And you're right. And it really does, not just kids, right? It kind of turns adults into kids, because we're like, wow, no way. How did they do that? That's so fun. So, I mean, it's such an interesting path and an interesting journey. And of course, it does speak to your classic kind of academic training in neuroscience. That, you understand sort of perception and cognition and how these visual effects really do come into play when we start to try and understand the psychology or the behavioral basis of how our brains work. And of course, you also gave us some background about the colorization work that you were doing with medical imaging and how that's such a perfect crossover. But I'd love to know from you, because I'm always so interested in everybody's journey, going into, first these movie studios or production companies, and then or visual effects houses, and then moving now into the startup world. How prepared do you feel like you were with your academic training, and how much do you think that you had to kind of self-educate? Did you know anything about business when you first started to make this transition? Was there a big learning curve for you?
Well, first of all, they've all been startups.
Oh, really? Okay.
When I left Harvard, it was just me and a machine.
Yeah.
And I built that into a company with the Maquilador, which is a Mexican production company. I had about 1,100 employees at the end of that company. Then I co-founded another company called Lightspan, which was infotainment. And we were trying to basically win the cable telco competition for the home, and provide K-6 education that was entertaining. And we did that using the Sony PlayStation and about 150 CDs that met all state requirements for kids. So that was another startup. And then the third one was Legend Films, where I reinvented colorization and also invented some visual effects technology. I did Scorsese's The Aviator, worked on that, and did a lot of work for HBO and Entourage. And then in 2007, I by that reinventing the colorization again. There was just me and one computer, and that turned into. I had a studio then in India with about 750 people. Then in 2007, I saw my first 3D ready television, a Mitsubishi DLP television. And it just blew me away. And I said, this is going to be the future of entertainment. At least I thought so back then. And I knew what Cameron was doing with Avatar. I
Yeah.
mean, the word got out. Nobody had seen it yet, but it was going to be groundbreaking. It was going to be a game changer. And when I saw 3D, I immediately thought about the conversion process. I mean, being able to convert movies from 2D to 3D. And it turned out that my colorization pipeline was about 65% of the process for converting movies from 2D to 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to invent the end, basically the back
Oh,
end.
wow.
So I did that, and right after, it's interesting because we were showing it to all the studios around 2008, and then I got my first contract to do a conversion. It was Michael Jackson's "This Is It" tour.
Mm-hmm.
And we delivered it. It was it was going to be ecologically based. He was going to have a 90-foot screen that was all 3D behind him as he was performing. And we turned it in. Unfortunately, the day he died, but we got paid for it. But it taught me a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
The next month, Avatar came out, and then the next month I got Alice in Wonderland,
Oh, very cool.
and from Disney, and it just kept on going from there. So you know the technology. I kind of lost where I was going with that. Oh, I know where it was. These were all startups,
Yeah.
100% startups from the beginning, and so these new ones that I'm doing are really no different. They're in different areas, except for AR. AR is an extension of what I've been doing.
Do you feel like that is a function of the time, just that you're really interested in these things kind of as they were at the bleeding edge? Or do you think that there's also some kind of personality factors that come into play, that you like to be sort of self-directive and that you don't want to come into an established team, but you want to kind of start this thing?
Well, I don't think I could work for a big company that's already established. I think I'd have to build it myself. I've never applied for a job. I've always made my own jobs, and I think I was lucky in that I was the right person at the right time when all of this digital imaging was just starting. And I had a knack for it, and I could instantly see the application and how it would work.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it seemed second nature almost. When you go back to those guys that wanted me to invent colorization, I mean, within an hour, I had this whole solution because it was so simple to me, and that's only because I think my orientation was not traditional. In other words, if you took a graphic artist or you took somebody who was in that field, they would have had a traditional approach towards that problem. But here, you take a neuroscientist who's working on medical images. I'm looking at it from an oblique angle, and to me, it would seem relatively simple. But if I were in the industry, I probably would have not been able to figure it out.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it really is that kind of cognitive flexibility that comes in sometimes. You're right. When you enter a problem-solving environment from a completely different background. And I think that speaks to something that that I often reiterate when I'm giving talks to students, is that don't be afraid of doors when they open, especially especially if they don't feel like 100% like they were on your kind of straight and narrow path, because sometimes you're the best person for that job. Kind of taking a left turn or a right turn means that you can offer something that the other people in the room maybe can't. And so just because you've always been training one way and you've always had this idea of what exactly where that training is going to lead you, try not to be too locked into that, because I think that sometimes the best revolutionary problem-solving approaches come from people who weren't so entrenched.
Yeah, one thing I tell people, I do a lot of advise a lot of PhD candidates and the like, and I always tell them, be very, very aware of whether you are in an echo chamber, because echo chambers are very, very easy to fall into. And what I mean by an echo chamber is if you're in an environment where all the people think the same way, and really are indoctrinated in one direction, you got to move out of that because you're never going to grow.
Yeah.
You're just going to end up being just like them, and that's really what happened. For instance, in with not medical imaging, but with digital Hollywood, for instance. And today it's happening with virtual reality because there's still an echo chamber in the entertainment industry. People are still talking about movie making using virtual reality, and I keep asking them, well, show me one title, one product in real storytelling that's not gaming. That's produced a return on the investment. They can't, and they won't. There won't be any because there's not enough of an installed base of people who actually want to put these things on and spend an hour watching something outside of their reality. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely limiting because of the hardware. But you're right. Like in terms of the applications that make perfect sense, like what's it called? Surgical theater, like training for surgery, for doing gaming, even like military applications and things like that. It's amazing, but you're right. Like, I don't want to wear a headset when I go to the movies. Also, it's getting so much better. It's getting to the point where I actually don't get sick much anymore in headsets, but I used to get so barfy when I wore those things.
Yeah, it was bad. I don't. They're not my thing at all. And I mean, augmented reality. I think augmented reality or virtual reality. Have you seen any AR or mixed reality portals?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, if you go into YouTube and just put in AR portals, you're going to be amazed at what you're going to see because basically they're actual doors, augmented reality doors that take you into a totally different environment. It could be a real environment or it could be an imaginary environment. So, but again, it's within your reality. So once you can look in the door, and you can go to left to the right and actually see more of the stuff. You can see parallax, and you can actually then go into the door and be encased in that environment. And if you look around, you can see where you came from.
That's cool. Oh, that's cool. Really cool. Yeah, you can look back and see your house back there through the. Oh, that's really neat. I love that. Oh man, I'm so going to do that. Like as soon as we're finished with this recording. Gosh, so much good stuff here, Barry. I would love to know from you. Like you mentioned the new startup that you're working on. What else is going on in your world right now? Like where do you have your focus?
Well, right now I'm running a studio called South Bay Visual Effects in Hollywood, and we're doing a 2D to 3D conversion as I did before with my other company, Legend 3D. But we're also involved in visual effects for major studios, Netflix and the like.
Okay, very cool. And then you've got this this AR startup that you're working on, and oh gosh, there was something that this is like so. I don't know, like oblique as the term that you use too, the conversation that we're having. But when originally we were scheduling this podcast, you were working on a different project that had some interesting like peaks to it. And one of the things that the publicist that reached out said was, oh, also, by the way, Barry has prosopagnosia. And I remember that really piquing my interest at the time because I think it's fascinating. I just wrote a big paper about it for school. And also for somebody who is so focused on visual effects and who's so focused on the look of things, how fascinating that you have a hard time with faces. So I'd love to just take a second to chat about that.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's something that's always fascinated me. And the beauty of it is that being a neuroscientist, I can introspectively examine myself and understand it. Prosopagnosia is face blindness, and it affects about 2.5% of the population. And most people don't even know they have it. Most people, you'll talk to people and say, "Well, I'm not good with faces. I'm not good with names." But in reality, they may have prosopagnosia. I mean, there are people. Oliver Sacks is a famous neurologist who had prosopagnosia so bad that he couldn't recognize himself in the mirror. I've got it to the point where I would need my wife to come to a cocktail party with me, and I'd have a leash.
Yeah.
And basically, she would tell me, these are the people that we've known for 25 years.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a major handicap. And a lot of people have it in business, and they just don't remember people, and that's the worst time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been looking to create an app that would allow people to actually recognize faces and recognize. I mean, because it's a medical condition.
Yeah, and if you could like see if some sort of database, or if there was a way for you to just get a little bit more information, or because people with prosopagnosia work around it by some people who don't have it as severely by, okay, maybe you'll recognize their voice, or maybe they always wear the same pair of glasses, or maybe but it's the synthesis of the face that you have a hard time with.
Well, people with prosopagnosia, I mean, if I saw you and I was really a great portrait artist, which I'm not, but if I saw you, I could paint your face perfectly.
Yeah.
And so that you and everybody else would think it was photoreal, even though I have prosopagnosia. But the problem is not recognizing you. It's that I look at faces, and people with prosopagnosia look at faces as pieces, not as a gestalt. All right. So when I see, if I painted you and then saw you in a supermarket out of context, I would walk right by you, would not recognize you.
Funny.
Yeah, it's really a handicap for a lot of people, and there's no cure for it, and nobody really cares about it. There's not a lot of research on it because you're not going to die from it.
It's true. Most of the research on prosopagnosia, I mean, I just wrote a big review paper on it. So most of the research is on, acquired prosopagnosia, but more and more people are looking at what they call congenital prosopagnosia or developmental prosopagnosia, where basically it does seem to be that there's less activity in the same region of the brain, the fusiform gyrus, as people who have acquired prosopagnosia, meaning that they bumped their head or they had a stroke and they actually damaged that region of the brain that's really good at recognizing faces. So architecturally, structurally, there doesn't seem to be a difference. There's only a functional difference in that area for people with with congenital prosopagnosia, which I take it is what you have because you've always had this problem. Yeah.
I've always had this problem, Jane Goodall has it. Steve Wozniak has it. There's so many people who actually suffer from it, and they have to deal with it, and it's really a problem. It would be wonderful if there was an app that could actually help it, and that the 2.5% is just the extreme. And on the other side, there are super recognizers, which is kind of cool, and those people never forget a face, no matter how trivial the introduction. You could a waiter. For lunch, you'll never forget that person's face. So, and here the thing that fascinates me the most about it as a neuroscientist is that this is one function that's hardwired in the brain. You're not going, if you don't have it, you're never going to get it. It's nothing you can improve. This is so important in our evolution that it's hardwired. It's probably because obviously. You don't want to be. You want to be able to recognize everybody in your tribe or in your group. And if you don't, then you're going to be killed.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that there's some argument now within the literature that congenital prosopagnosia, or developmental prosopagnosia, is it a pathology or is it just literally the extreme end, the low end of normal? Just like you mentioned that there's the other extreme of the super recognizers. Because I feel like I fall really somewhere in between. I can recognize the people that I'm working with on a regular basis. I can recognize my friends and family. So I know I don't have prosopagnosia, but I still consider myself to be one of those people who's not great with faces. Like if I only meet somebody once, or I can't really contextualize them heavily, or, they don't remind me of somebody else, like that's gone. Yeah. That's just gone. Like the next time I see them, 6 months later, out of context, I met them one time at a party, or I took a class with them, a one session class or something. Yeah, I'm not going to remember that person later.
I know, but to somebody with prosopagnosia, it's incredibly socially damaging because you see somebody that
Yeah.
but you can't place them, and you can't go up and talk to them because you may have known them for 25
Yeah, it's
years.
like at least.
Your kids may have grown up with your
Oh,
kids, and you
wow.
can't. And to say, just to say, I can't reckon. I don't remember your name is a huge insult to them
Yeah.
because their ego is hurt. Because I mean, I'm not important enough for you to recognize me.
And like, you
You
can't
know,
walk around all day, every day. I have face blindness. I have face blindness. Whereas like with your friends, your family, the people who you know well, you can talk to them about it. They know it about you. Don't take it personally.
sure,
I have a very different brain than you do. And this is why I love you and I care about you deeply. I just sometimes don't recognize you.
yeah,
But yeah, trying to disclaim that to everybody. And I think it's also important. Some of the stuff that I was reading, which was really interesting, was about children with congenital prosopagnosia, and the idea that like parents need to be ready to recognize the fact that when their kids look confused when they go to pick them up from school, or they sometimes
yeah.
follow strangers thinking that they're you to be aware of the fact that this can be really scary and overwhelming for children because they may not recognize their own parents sometimes.
Exactly. And I mean, there's no proof to this. Nobody's looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a possibility that there's a certain number of types of
Mm-hmm.
autism may simply be, children don't recognize who they're talking to,
Yeah,
who they're,
that could give you all sorts of,
and
that's true, kind of
and they
downstream
and they and,
effects.
they couldn't. They're not telling you that because they don't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
And again, nobody's looking at this. I don't know if it's true, and no, I don't know if there's any research on it or anything. But to me, studying prosopagnosia, it seems like a natural thing for them, not to be looking people in the eye, not to be engaged with them because they don't know who they
Yeah,
are.
and this does happen a lot in neuropsychology, where that's why differential diagnosis is so important, right? Is that there are some, whether you want to call them disorders or just things where like somebody's not as neurotypical, that it's very different things in the brain and even very different behavioral outcomes. But there's some crossover with this like one thing where you have to rule everything else out until you can really know what's going on. We see it a lot in psychology with like, let's say trauma-informed disorders and ADHD or anxiety. Like generalized anxiety and PTSD can look really similar, or ADHD and PTSD can look really similar if you aren't like kind of going through and doing that differential. So that it is really interesting that, I wouldn't be surprised if some people were completely misdiagnosed because
Yeah,
of that reason.
or it may be one and the
Yeah,
same. Is what
that's
I'm
true.
saying.
And it may also just be comorbid, like, one of those things where
Hmm.
it's, maybe one and the same, or it may be that it so commonly comes together because of the way that our brains develop.
Yeah,
So yeah,
could be.
there's a lot of interesting, hey, people who are listening who are trying to figure out what to do for your PhD thesis. You've got some ideas here
There's one.
just from this
Absolutely.
podcast. Well, gosh, Barry, this has been absolutely fascinating. I always close every episode by asking my guests the same two questions, and they're kind of big picture questions. You interested in giving them a crack?
Well, let's try me.
All right. So I want you to think about the future. Something that I'm sure you do often in your work, thinking about the future in whatever context is honestly relevant to you. It could be your work, it could be your personal a personal context, it could be global stuff, big picture stuff. But the first thing that I want to know is what is kind of the thing that really does keep you up the most at night? The thing that maybe you're the most concerned about, maybe even a little bit pessimistic, dare I say cynical about, that you're worried about. And on the flip side of that, I would love to know, what is it that you're genuinely looking forward to? What do you have true optimism for?
Well, I think I can answer them both in the same way,
Okay.
and it all relates to what I'm doing. Having gone through colorization and 2D to 3D conversion, I got to learn pretty much what the consumer is looking for
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, I hate to be this narrow, but really I'm focused on imaging and on monetizing various types of
Mm-hmm.
media. And what I realize is that the reason that virtual reality doesn't work is because it creates too many demands on the audience.
Mm-hmm.
The audience really wants to be told a story. And when we created 24 frames a second for film, it didn't create realism. It created something that was a little bit strange. It was just above the flicker fusion frequency, where you can't see the frames, but you can see motion. But that was enough to take you out of your everyday world and get you immersed into it. It takes you somewhere else. And I think that's what people are working on right now. I think that's where the audiences are today, the majority of them. And the thing that bothers me is when so much money is being spent on these alternative realities that nobody's going to actually ever be able to monetize, when there are some really fantastic, unbelievable things coming down the path in terms of mixed reality that's going to blow people away, and that will genuinely be an extension of the storytelling medium. And I think we're going to see that within, again, I think I'm starting on it, and I think I may have a glimpse of it within the next 6 months, but I think that's where it's all going. Again, the thing that keeps me awake at night is the enormous amounts of money being wasted on technology in media that's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. And so is the flip side of it what you just mentioned, kind of on the tail of that the thing that you're actually looking forward to is what you're really investing a lot of your time into right now?
I can't wait to show it to everybody. If once this comes together, it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be Pokemon Go all over again, except significantly different.
Very cool. Gosh, well, that's really exciting. So, Barry, I mean, I just have to thank you so much for taking the time, for joining me, for being so flexible and understanding with my just like bananas schedule. So before we go, let everybody know, how can they follow kind of what you've been doing, what you're up to? Is there a website? Are you active on social media? How can they learn more about you?
Very active on social media. My Twitter handle is movie producer. Obviously, I got that early on. But my LinkedIn is probably I also have a blog, but I generally spend most of my time on LinkedIn. And if you look at LinkedIn, look me up. And what I do is I talk about the latest and greatest in terms of television, movies, imaging in general, that sort of technology.
Very cool. Gosh. Well, Barry, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really fascinating.
Well, thank you.
Of course. And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.